Moving along from that, though all of this is related, point 4 out of 5, Last of Us versus Game of Thrones. Last of Us developed and explored side characters from the source material, whereas Game of Thrones cut central characters increasingly, and yes, they are at a different scale. Last of Us is a relatively small scale game. It's mostly Joel and Ellie and the people they meet. Game of Thrones is a sprawling thing with hundreds, thousands of major characters. Some were going to be cut. I'm talking relative even to itself in the first 4 seasons. There were characters that they just cut and let fall by the wayside. That they weren't planning it out. You cannot say these guys are professional filmmakers, versus The Last of Us. The 3rd episode is devoted almost entirely to the story of Frank and Bill. And there's the story of Bill the survivalist and his partner Frank. I mean, Joel is in it briefly, Ellie's in it like right at the end, but this expanded considerably from the source material. Game of Thrones would have never done that. That they were dropping established characters. This gave more for them to do. And it just tangent here. Some people drew backlash from the usual bigotry that they're inventing a gay relationship. Well, guys, I didn't play the game, but having checked, it's like Bill was gay in the video game. I mean, when after they die and Joel and Ellie are leaving with Bill's truck, Ellie finds a gay men's porn magazine in the back seat in the video game. And that scene is line for line in the TV show. So he is a character who, in the background, like in a line or two, they mention he's gay in the video game, and they said, why not expand to show what that guy's life was like for a full episode? Because he's this interesting survivalist character. That isn't an invention. And me, myself, I'm usually like a hardcore purist book fan type. I am hesitant to race swap, gender swap, or orientation swap characters in an adaptation, because I feel if you're going to do it, you need to do it thoroughly, carefully and attentively, not just a half-hearted, whitewashing, but thoroughly develop that you change this character into these fundamentally different characteristics. Like, if you're going to make Jim Gordon a black man in the last Batman movie, think of how he'd react differently to, like, being a police officer, or if you changed a Marvel character to be a woman instead. That if you're going to do it thoroughly. So I'm hesitant to only do it if you're really paying attention. Like, House of the Dragon had some characters that they changed to be black, but it's a fantasy world, and I felt it made sense in context to they're from the other continent. But I'm fine with that. But I'm not, let's change it for the sake of changing it. This is an irrelevant discussion, however, because they didn't invent that they're gay. He was a gay character in the game. I shouldn't even be spending that much time talking about this. I don't have a problem with that. And it's a really poignant story on top of that it's, let's focus on these other characters, and they do not get killed by the zombie apocalypse. That it's an interesting part of The Last of Us. It's 20 years going into this apocalypse, that they've managed to survive for 20 years, and eventually one of them just dies of old age. And that's a universal theme, the inevitable creep of time and saying goodbye to loved ones. So that was a really well done thing. And just the idea that you would invent a full episode about what was a side character in the game, really expanding on them and doing it well, that is something Game of Thrones never even tried to do. That they were trying to concentrate on the core cast members who could plausibly win Emmy Awards. And this increased drastically in the later seasons. I'm not just talking about that what is still a problem, that like Mira Reed disappears after season 7, or let's quickly rush the Tyrells out the door by blowing them up, when, in the books that won't happen that way, that there's no way this could happen that neatly. I'm talking like major people who were part of the starring cast. Now, it's a big show, so there's 24 starring cast members. So season 5 onward, what they came up with was, we're going to have this tier within a tier. Tier A, within the starring cast. These are the people, they might as well have titled it People Who Could Plausibly Win Us Emmy Awards to increase our profile. It's Jon Snow, Daenerys, the three Lannister siblings, and the Stark girls. And you notice how, like, in almost dream logic, other characters just fall out of the narrative, like Brienne has nothing to do. Theon increasingly has nothing to do, and there weren't story arcs for them. These are major characters, Theon and Brienne. And the awkward tension that happened at the Season 8 Emmy Awards is, because all this is about these are the people we are pandering for awards, HBO didn't mount a campaign to get Alfie Allen, Theon, and Gwen Christie, Brienne nominations. They felt cheated, so they self-submitted and actually got final round nominations at the Emmys that year. And this awkwardness that the Theon actor is there and they were not supporting him and he got in independently. This isn't the only time that an actor is independently submitted without the support of their studio and actually managed to get the nomination. It's rare, but it's been known to happen in a few isolated cases, that just how much they were not focusing on the entire show, but just on that core cast who could win awards. And I've been going over Maureen Ryan's great book on the past decade of corrupt TV stuff by the studios, Burn It Down. And there's this preview chapter I made a video on. Tell me in the comments if it reminds you of that the preview chapter on Lost, which explained, and I made a thing comparing it to the tiers system on Game of Thrones. It was only about, after season 1, it shifted to be just about the core trio who they felt could win them awards. And other actors felt really cheated by this. And The Last of Us is custom built for Emmy pandering. It's largely not father-daughter as such, but it's largely a lone wolf and cub story with Joel and Ellie, and they meet episodic characters on their journey, but not major recurring ones so much. They didn't even need to structurally have that much time devoted to other characters. Nonetheless, for The Last of Us, they devoted a almost full episode, you barely see the two leads, and it's on these one-shot characters from the source material who they expanded on. That was amazing. That's what they should be doing. Will House of the Dragon do that as it goes on? It's hard to say, because more than Game of Thrones, it is the story of Rhaenyra versus Alicent and Daemon, but they did say Season 2, the story will shift to their children more. But Season 1, it made entirely sense that these are the core characters, that they're just setting up everything else. Like, as it goes on, will the story expand to cover everyone else, not just people who could win awards? Is a major ongoing concern, like the complaints about, we were saying Bela didn't get enough to do. Then in the first teaser, they made it a point to show, here is Bela riding her dragon, we're not going to leave that out again. I know there were time constraints that I sympathize, but I remember people, like in Season 7, saying, praise things the show did differently. What are things they did better than the books? Like how they actually showed Loras and Renly having a few scenes together in Seasons 1 and 2, and what the Tyrells were doing with Renly off-screen. I'm like, that was 5 seasons ago. And the whole point is we are complaining that they have stopped doing that since maybe Season 2. Because the Renly actor, the Loras actor, were not people who could have won them Emmy Awards due to their scale in the story. But I saw people just, the compartmentalization, clinging to, remember how great it was that they showed 1 or 2 scenes of people off screen. That wasn't like the full episode thing that The Last of Us did. This isn't expanding the story. This is like Mira Reed suddenly ceases to exist, you know? So that's point 4. Actually expanding on side characters who, let's be honest, are people who aren't just blatantly up for Emmy Awards.